Hello everyone and welcome to Elevate 2021. My name is Don Clayton, President of Intertek Consulting. I'm here to discuss the approaches Intertek has taken to migrating the EAServer Enterprise Application Framework, also known as the DDS EAF, to the C# language. Before we get started, I'd like to mention that I'm the author of this presentation and was not compensated by Appian for this opportunity. This presentation is protected under U.S. copyright law, so please take appropriate action. All rights and references to third-party materials and products, including the EAF and SAP Power Designer, are not owned nor expressly endorsed by Appian. In particular, the EAF was widely distributed as shareware and is now considered to be in the public domain. Finally, Appian and Intertek Consulting are not warranting the suitability of the approach described herein for your organization. For more information on fitness for any use, please contact me after the presentation. So what are we going to cover here? First of all, what is the DDS EAF? The Enterprise Application Framework was commonly used for deploying PowerBuilder components to EAServer. It was developed by Dynamic Data Solutions, later named Synergy Systems. The company was founded by Carson Hager. Carson was assisted by a number of persons who've been involved in the development of the PowerBuilder Foundation classes, including Alex Whitney, Claudio Quant, David Fink, and many others. There are a number of similarities between the PFC and the EAF. Like the PFC, the EAF was developed primarily in Houston, Texas, and was used by a large number of firms nationwide to build and deploy mission-critical PowerBuilder components to the middle tier using EAServer and other application servers of the day. Why migrate the EAF to C#? Well, companies that have existing investments in EAF components will need to migrate the EAF first. But how to migrate? I will review the steps required to migrate the DDS EAF components from PowerBuilder to C#. Successfully migrating the framework is a prerequisite to migrating your business logic developed in this framework. Next, I'll discuss the steps needed to rehost those components from EAServer into IIS. I will show you the steps I took to successfully migrate the framework and some of the challenges and opportunities that this provided, including some of the analysis I did prior to migration, like object models and so forth. At the end of this presentation, I'll give you some final thoughts on the process in general and some things to keep in mind. And finally, the techniques I show here are applicable to any business logic you would like to rehost in C#, not just the EAF. A little bit more about me. Once again, my name is Don Clayton, President of Intertek Consulting. We are Appian's authorized North American consulting partner. I was fortunate enough to be in the beta program for PowerBuilder 1.0 starting in December 1990. After developing with PowerBuilder full-time for about 18 months, I began teaching PowerBuilder 2.0 and since that time taught approximately 2,000 to 3,000 people how to use PowerBuilder. I also ran projects that had as many as 50 PowerBuilder programmers working simultaneously, and at one point ran PowerSoft's largest training partner in North America in the early 1990s. I founded Intertek Consulting with two friends I went to college with, and we became a PowerSoft consulting and education partner in January of 1995. In 1996, PowerSoft was acquired by Sybase, and we became a Sybase partner and remained so for 17 years before SAP acquired Sybase and we became an SAP partner. During the 17 years we were a Sybase partner, we were also a vendor to Sybase Professional Services and supported the Power Designer and EAServer products as well as the various different Sybase databases. We also provided consulting services through Sybase to approximately 200 different companies. Intertek first started using Appian for PowerBuilder in 2004. Over the course of about 12 years, we helped numerous companies be successful with the Appian for PowerBuilder technology. But when Appian acquired the PowerBuilder product from SAP, we were fortunate enough to be invited to be Appian's authorized North American consulting partner. We provide a variety of professional services, including consulting, education, contract programming, and project management to the PowerBuilder community. For more information about our services, please visit our website at www.easerver.com. intertech.us. But what is the DDS EAF? The EAF was a common framework for PowerBuilder components hosted in EAServer for many years. Also, PFC did not have a business object service, so many customers used the EAF as a business object service for PFC applications. The EAF was developed to be service-oriented like PowerBuilder's PFC, but for the middle tier. It's also called the PFC of EAServer because of its service-oriented architecture and the team that worked on it. The original strength of the EAF was that it was a well-developed and well-abstracted framework. It introduced a number of concepts to the PowerBuilder community, including reinforcing the separation of business logic from the user interface and relocating the business logic to a middle tier. These techniques are key to achieving success with the PowerScript Migrator today. There were 3 versions, version 2 to version 4, and the techniques shown here will work with any of the versions equally well. The EAF typically shipped as 3 different PowerBuilder targets, and there's also an optional business object framework that can be used with or without the EAServer framework. So why migrate the EAF to C#? Well, systems that use the EAF can be migrated once the framework is migrated. But there were some secondary goals of this effort, including the fact that the EAF presented a ripe opportunity to test Appion's PowerScript Migrator tool using industrial-strength PowerBuilder code in a real-world scenario. Intertech's investment in learning the PowerScript Migrator and the strengths and weaknesses of the Code Migrator has helped us provide support to several different companies so far. The EAF is a robust implementation of a business object architecture for PowerBuilder. It was well written and should migrate well, and business logic partitioning is a prerequisite for using the C# migration tools in SnapDevelop. Migrating a significant amount of PowerBuilder logic to C# allowed Intertech to fully test drive the C# migration process and SnapDevelop and develop competency in performing such migrations. I'd like to discuss some design patterns that were used with the EAF. The first is partitioning, which generally refers to the separation of business logic from the user interface. Separating business logic from the user interface is desirable, but the extreme ease of use of PowerBuilder provides an opportunity to create robust business applications, but also allowed programmers to inadvertently combine business logic with the user interface when creating windows and data windows. The MVC pattern is a widely recognized pattern for implementing the partitioning of business logic from the user interface. The model contains the business logic, the view refers to the user interface, and controllers are used to orchestrate long-running processes or otherwise coordinate activities between the other 2 areas. With distributed processing, this refers to the relocation of the partitioned logic to another computer or logical tier. Distributed processing introduces the concept of location transparency, where the calling logic, for example, the view, can call business logic without regard to where the business logic exists. Historically, this is accomplished using proxy objects in PowerBuilder. Delegation of behavior is used as a part of what is generally known as responsibility-driven design. It also allows for highly specialized behaviors to be developed and leveraged across systems. And service-based architectures take advantage of delegation by systematically disencapsulating the logic that would otherwise be contained in abstract or ancestor classes and delegating that behavior over to families of service-based classes. In the PowerBuilder world, the best example is the PowerBuilder Foundation Classes, or PFC, which delegates behavior such as window resizing and security constructs to a specialized set of service classes. There are 2 main categories of EAF components: the interface managers and the business objects. Interface managers are components that are responsible for providing data window content and data in a variety of formats, including HTML, XML, PDFs, Excel, and of course native data windows. Developers would typically inherit from the interface manager base classes and register their data windows as data sets within the interface manager components. The dataset concept was primarily used to abstract the differences between data windows and data stores. Client developers then invoked the interface managers using built-in EAF helper classes and request datasets specifying the desired content type, argument, and etc. Business objects, on the other hand, are components that encapsulate reusable business logic such as entity-level validation and other business constructs. Business objects were added in EAF version 3 and enhanced over time for better use. For example, interface managers can delegate the update process of particular data sets to one or more business objects to further decouple the business logic from display logic. And business object components frequently were created at a later date without any major change to the client code. The EAF also provided a variety of pre-built components and services to accelerate distributed application development with PowerBuilder. The list includes the ones shown here. While some of these pre-built services remain useful today and are even core to the functionality of the EAF, others should rightfully be retired and superseded using C#.NET equivalents in the middle tier. But before migrating your PowerBuilder code to C#, it's essential that developers review the inheritance hierarchies and other object-oriented patterns used in their PowerBuilder code. The EAF is no exception to this, and so I will demonstrate. You can browse the object hierarchy using the object browser in PowerBuilder, or you can use SAP Power Designer, which is extraordinarily useful for reviewing complex systems. Here I'm showing you PowerBuilder 2021 with my EAF projects open up. So I'm going to open up the PowerBuilder object browser, go to the user object tab, and then right click and show the hierarchy of my user objects. This in turn will show me how objects are related through inheritance. So this is a useful way to see how the application has been constructed. My favorite tool for analyzing object-oriented relationships is Sybase Power Designer, specifically the object-oriented model. Here I'm showing a model that is a reverse engineering of the DDS EAF objects, and as you can see, they are all inherited from the non-visual object in PowerBuilder. The primary objects cluster into a number of areas, and we'll talk about those more in just a minute. The Power Designer, as well as the PowerScript Migrator, assume the non-visual object is an empty class when it is not. This class diagram shows all of the classes in the PowerBuilder language. This class diagram shows the three classes that the EAF relies upon. That is the Power object, the non-visual object, and an enumerated class called the Trig event. In order to more seamlessly migrate the DDS EAF, we had to scaffold some ancestral classes and add some additional behaviors like various forms of post-event, trigger event, get parent, and so forth in order to more easily migrate the code. So how do we go about migrating components from PowerBuilder to C#? Well, we use PowerBuilder CloudPro's PowerScript Migrator along with the SnapDevelop IDE, or you can use the Visual Studio IDE for this. The steps would be that first you want to consolidate your framework into a single library. Although this is not required, we recommend it for easy control of namespaces. You would then want to make sure that the framework code can compile cleanly in PowerBuilder and then create a solution in SnapDevelop and at least one project, and then invoke the PowerScript Migrator. So here I've opened up SnapDevelop 2021, and I'm going to load up a partially completed solution called Demo Solution. So we'll let that load up. And then I'm going to go ahead and load the workspace, which is the same workspace that I have open in PowerBuilder. Let me go over and show you that. So this is the same workspace in PowerBuilder as I have right here. And so once you have done that, you are able to do a number of things. One of the first things you need to do is you need to make sure that your NuGet is properly configured. And you do that in the Tools Options area, and you go to NuGet. The NuGet Package Manager will allow NuGet to automatically download the packages that are referred in the code. And you can also automatically check for missing packages during SnapDevelop. You can then specify where your package sources are coming from. And in this case, we want to include NuGet. We'll push that to the top. And then we will include several others as well. Once your NuGet packages are configured, then you're able to review the options for C# generation. The PowerScript Migrator has a number of options for determining how PowerBuilder will be migrated into C#. While beyond the scope of this particular presentation, you have options in terms of how to deal with arrays, how to deal with any data types, how to translate methods, and how to set other translation settings. You'll want to make sure that you have a good understanding of all of these settings before you go forward. Once you're comfortable with your environment and your settings, you're then ready to migrate the code. So let's do that. I'm going to go ahead and highlight the EAF for EAServer. I'm then going to right click and I'm going to batch translate. And I'll specify a folder, and doing that I can then specify the namespace, and I'm going to cut over to a completed project because the code migration process takes a little time. And as you can see now, my project has been reorganized into a EAF solution here, and each of the classes that existed inside of the DDS EAF for EAServer right here, again, these being the PowerBuilder classes, each one of those classes was migrated into a set of C# classes. Here I can show you some sample code. This is a migration of the NCST component. But notice that the way that this class is defined, that's actually inheriting from C#'s object class. So I'm going to make a minor change here. Recall that I had mentioned that we needed to create some mezzanine tier code. This is an example of that. Here's the power object in C#. We wrote the power object in order to make the code generators work a little bit more seamlessly. So I'm going to modify the DDS EAF NCST component so that it inherits from power object. First, I'm going to add a using statement. Now, as you can see, the component is inherited from a non-visual object. As I scroll down through the code, you can see that the C# code generated is actually quite readable. So this gives the PowerBuilder developer a very good start, as we can see. There are some additional steps needed to rehost PowerBuilder components in the middle tier from EAServer to IIS. One of the primary challenges is that the TCP protocols need to be changed from CORBA IIOP, which stands for Internet Inter-Object Protocol, to HTTPS Web Services. While CORBA was a groundbreaking attempt to provide a standard set of protocols for invoking distributed logic, it's largely been superseded today with modern web services, particularly REST web services that use JSON. Fortunately, PowerBuilder supports REST and JSON extremely well, including the newly added REST client object and the JSON manipulation classes built into PowerBuilder to allow us to parse and build JSON extremely quickly. Organizations have additional challenges in needing to replatform EAServer components. Many companies use EAServer as a primer for distributed development, including sporadic use of Java, JSPs, and distributed COM. So all that's got to be sorted out. Use of any other technologies is beyond the scope of this presentation, but should be considered by the organization facing these challenges. Finally, an important aspect of this framework was the goal of making HTML-based data windows easier to use. I think we all agree that it would be terrific if Appian could develop a modern HTML5-based data window. I encourage the PowerBuilder community to make this a top request to Appian. But unless and until that time comes, companies that use EAServer with an HTML front end will need to use third-party middle-tier componentry using native PowerBuilder APIs to generate HTML data windows in the middle tier. If your company uses the HTML data windows, please feel free to contact me for more information on the options that are available to you. I have some final thoughts on code migration. Some lessons learned. First of all, make sure you fixed issues in the base or the ancestor classes first. That's a prerequisite. And in the process of doing that, you'll want to master the solution-wide or project-wide search and replace dialog. I wish PowerBuilder had one of these. The PowerScript migrator could really use a declared interfacer class for the non-visual object that had some valuable behaviors in it. For example, trigger event, post event, class name, and so on. My thinking is this could be added to the PowerScript.bridge class. Secondly, frameworks like the EAF are best shipped in multiple libraries in PowerBuilder, but should be consolidated into one library before migration. Recall that, and this is weird, but EAServer used to combine PowerBuilder libraries into one library before deploying to EAServer, and it did it in reverse library order. So you'll need to make sure that you merge your multiple libraries into a consolidated library in reverse library list order. But once the framework has been successfully migrated, it can be compiled as a managed code assembly, and then you can use the using statement to add the managed code assembly to your project, and then you can migrate the balance of your code successfully. Frameworks like EAF should be migrated independently as managed code assemblies, and then by adding the using statement, you can seal the framework code and separate it from the balance of your project code. Here's an example using our PowerBuilder managed code assembly. Here we've got definitions of our non-visual object, which is inherited from the Power object. We've been able to write our own methods for constructors and destructors and so forth. Some final thoughts on this process. PowerBuilder is much more forgiving as a language than C#. The migration utility couldn't possibly catch all of the vagaries that we as PowerBuilder developers have accumulated over the years. A couple of examples here. Look for if statements on Booleans that are not expressly stated. For example, if this.trace, IBTrace, which infers IBTrace is true, that really should migrate as if this.IBTrace equal to true. Also, look for things like stray quotes in the migrated code as the migrator attempts to deal with single and double quotes that have been mixed and matched and embedded in your PowerScript code. Be sure to connect with your fellow PowerBuilder programmers on the Appian community at community.appian.com. Also look for the Appian community on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn and YouTube. Lots of good information there. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. My name is Don Clayton with Intertech Consulting, and at this point, we're going to pause for any questions that you may have.